Welcome, everyone, to Live with Marketers, LinkedIn's award-winning live broadcast series where we explore some of the most timely topics in the B2B marketing space with some of the brightest minds in the arena. I'm your host, Alex Rand. I'm a senior content marketing manager at LinkedIn, and I'm delighted to be broadcasting to you today from sunny Los Angeles. Now, before we dive into today's agenda, I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the escalating conflict in Ukraine, which has tragically led to yet another humanitarian crisis. We were thinking about our Ukrainian colleagues here and abroad and all of the women, children, and men who have been affected. There are several organizations available to support if you're interested, such as the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund, Voices of Children Charitable Foundation, the Red Cross, and more. So please visit the short link that's at the bottom of your screen if you would like to contribute. There's no easy transition from that, but I just wanted to keep things light today. Hopefully we can still put on an educational broadcast for you. So thank you so much for joining today's episode, where we will take a look at modern corporate brand management in the age of social media, and how the fundamental assumptions about how a brand's reputation is evaluated has truly, truly shifted. Our hope is that you're going to come away today from this with some new ideas about how to approach brand management, whether it's your corporate brand or your personal brand. And now it is time to introduce our guests. Today I have with me Obed Louisant and Lita Citroen. I would love for both of you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what it is you do, what companies you work for, and as is tradition here at LinkedIn, share something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. Obed, I'll begin with you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So Obed Louisant, I am responsible for transformation and culture at the IBM company. So what that means is a couple of different functions. It's our diversity and inclusion, leadership, talent management skills, hiring for the company, and as well as our transformation initiatives. As far as something that you won't see on my LinkedIn profile, maybe the three things that's most important to me: faith, family, and health. Faith, because it helps to ground you in your values and principles. Family gives you something to work for and keeps you grounded. And then health, it gives you the resilience to keep on working.
Love it. Family, something to work for and something to go to therapy about. Let's keep it real.
There's that factor too.
Yeah. Lita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex and Obed. I am so excited to share the stage with both of you today. So a little bit about me. I spent 20 years in the corporate world, standing up big brands and big companies, and pivoted to personal reputation management and personal branding in 2008. So today I have the honor of working with amazing individuals around the world who are all passionate about telling their story in the right way, being in control of their reputation and their brand. And I get to do that. I'm a speaker and author, and I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor. So I know many of the people on this program have participated in that. And I'm just really excited to talk about today's conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking the time to be here. You both bring a wealth of experience. So I'm so excited to have you here today to share your perspectives. Forgot to mention, and Lita did not mention because she's very humble, but she also wrote a book called Control the Narrative, which I just happen to have here. What a coincidence. So it's the Executive's Guide to Building, Pivoting, and Repairing Your Reputation. I just bought my copy and dove in. I'm loving it so far. And I'm excited for her to share a little bit more of her wisdom around it.
So you literally wrote a book on it.
You wrote a book on it. So
if I got royalties on that title, trust me, it would be a game changer, because that's everybody's talking about, right? How do we control the narrative, which is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. And if you don't shape the narrative, someone else will shape it for you. So better to get ahead of the game and put out your messaging first. Okay, so let's get right to it. Corporate reputation is a really big factor when consumers decide which brand to go with. Consumers expect brands to align with their own values, and they want evidence that a brand is actually living those values, right? So it's not just lip service; they're actually doing the things that they say that they're going to be doing. Their heads in the game. But before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of this new phenomenon of this. The level at which we hold brands to today, which we probably should have always been holding them to. Let's start by defining some terms. So when we say corporate brand reputation, when we say brand management, what are we really talking about? And Lita, we can begin with you.
Well, the way I explain brand is, while some may think it has to do with hot irons and coals and cattle, it actually has to do with experience, right? A brand is a promise of something that I will deliver. So to create a brand means being really clear about what is the experience you want your target audience, your stakeholders, your employees, your customers, whoever your audience is, to feel. So if I go to a certain store, I believe I'm going to have an experience. If I buy a certain car, I'm going to feel a certain way. And that sets the tone for the executive voice, the marketing, all of the interactions and the culture of the organization. So a brand is an expectation of an experience. Simply put, personal or corporate, it's an experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily what a brand says or what they're selling, but it's how they made you feel, which I think has been rephrased in many different industries. Obed, what are your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree with that, with the experience point, because, and then I would add to it, it's also around the character of the organization. So, how do people experience you, and what is your character? So, I do think that organizations are much like individuals or people, from that standpoint. So, being able to understand the how do you experience it, and then understand the characters of that organization, what you really stand for, and the fact that it's consistent.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that as well. We are going to kick it over to the audience. We want to ask you questions. So we're taking time for a quick poll. Now, Jeff Bezos, who, as we know, is the chairman of Amazon, said that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So what are people saying about your brand when you're not in the room? No, that's not the question, but that will get you thinking. The question is, do you feel you have a healthy corporate reputation? This is just to kind of get the sense of where everyone's at who's tuned in today. So you can say A, yes, we feel we're doing well. B, we're doing okay. C, honestly, not sure. We don't know who owns it. Finally, D, we're struggling. We need help. SOS, aka that's why we're here on the broadcast, because we need help. So we'll give you a couple seconds to reply. And while we're doing that, do we have any predictions what we're going to hear? What do we think?
I think the piece that was typically missing in the experiences I had was, how do we measure it? Right? So how are we measuring our brand? And if you insulate within the organization and look internal, you're going to have a very different picture sometimes than what your external stakeholders are going to say. So companies that do surveying and feedback and have scorecards and are really dialing into what their communities and their constituents care about, they're going to have a good sense of how their brand looks. But if there isn't that, it can be kind of self-fulfilling. What do you think, Obed?
You know, I think if you go back to how we defined it around that that experience and that character, like society today calls for people to react to things, and then there is constant on the back foot or responsive or transaction. So, but that's not character, and that's not consistent experience, right? So I think people will get tied up on well, what happened in the news yesterday, or what did we respond to last week, versus the overall perception, experience, and character of the organization, and a result struggle with this question.
Yeah, I think those are all valid points. I think you'll also, yeah, you'll get different answers from different people in the organization that you ask. The C-suite might have a lofty view of what's going on. At LinkedIn, we use a service called Glint, where we send out like a pulse survey twice a quarter to see how people are feeling. So I think that helps us to have actionable takeaways on what to do next to improve the culture. But we have results. Results are in. 57% have said, yes, we feel we have a healthy. Coming in second, honestly, not sure. Third, we're doing okay. No one said they need help. So guess what, guys? We're packing up our bags. This is the end of the broadcast. Thank you for your time.
Well, I think the 29% that say not sure, I mean, there's opportunity there, right?
Yes.
Not sure could mean it's great or it's not so great. And perception mapping, which is what I do when I work with clients, is really to get that outside in view, because your outside audiences are the people who are buying and engaging and referring you or not. And we need to know what their perception is, and if it matches with what we think we're projecting out as an experience.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to just check in with whether your clients and the people who are experiencing your brand are saying the same thing that you're saying or thinking. So while so I think it's a healthy thing to always just check in on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about, so now that we've defined brand reputation, we know a little bit about how our audience feels about their internal corporate reputation. A lot has changed over the past 3 years, 2-3 years, obviously. What are the factors that are now shaping brand reputation, and how is it different than maybe what it was in the past? Obed, we can start with you.
Sure. I think a couple of things are different now. One is as we're seeing through data, more and more individuals are shifting where they place their trust. And trust is being eroded in formal organizations like government, social organization, even religion. And so that leaves an opportunity in the private sector, and particularly in businesses, of meeting people where they are and helping to build trust through employee advocacy and an engagement. So, and then that drives transformational change. So one is where trust is being built and how it's being eroded in a broader social context. I think one of the key ways of building trust is through listening, right? So creating an environment where you've got a listening culture. A couple of the things that we do at IBM in helping to drive a listening culture is things like worldwide engagements or jams. We have lots of opportunities for employees to provide and associates to provide feedback through surveys. We have enterprise-wide Ask Me Anything sessions. So really pausing and listening before you act is really important in building trust, in our opinion. Second thing I think is really shifting and changing is how fast information flows, right? So, and levels of transparency. So gone are the days that, you have some private interaction with a client or employee. Today, through social and the speed of information flow, those conversations or those experiences could be replicated, very quickly throughout an organization, and then also impact brand and reputation quite significantly. And then the third is just consistency, right? And then I think it's about, and consistency builds character, it builds impression, and it builds a foundation of what an overall experience is. So I think those are some things that are really shifting today, and between trust, information, and the speed of information, and overall consistency, and how that fits into character.
Yeah, agreed. Trust is consistency over time. And to your point about the speed of which information is moving around, it's not only that you're going to interact with the brand on social, but you're going to start following the folks who work for the brand on social. Mm-hmm. So then whatever they're saying now is kind of a reflection on your brand, whether you see it that way or not.
Exactly. Sometimes the character of the individual that is speaking speaks louder than the message that they're sending, right? So we have to be really careful what are their faces and then what those individuals might stand for.
Yep. Lita, thoughts?
Well, I think just to build on what Obed said and introduce maybe some different language, I think it is about trust, and trust comes from only one place in my experience, and that is values plus action, right? When you tell me what you stand for, you tell me what you believe in and you would fight for and you advocate and you at a core believe in. I mean, I sometimes define values as your moral compass, right? And sometimes our values aren't as obvious to us or other people as we might think. But when your values match your action, so you tell me you believe in something, and then I see you consistently show evidence of that, I see proof, I see action aligned with those values, I can start to establish credibility for you, and I can start to trust you. Now, it takes repetition, and it does take time. It's not an easy fix. But the trust formula, values plus action, I've never found a way around that. But I think to the point you make about social, I think social media really added a new layer and wrinkle, if you will, into the whole brand reputation management ecosphere, because it is uncontrollable. And in some ways, it is very untethered. And that causes reputation challenges for individuals and for companies. So monitoring social, understanding how to use social to your advantage, I think is critical. And to that point, I would say my third bullet point is context. The more context we have out there about what the company stands for, what the individuals stand for. And context isn't just content. It's behaviors, it's relationships, and it's all these touch points. It sounds like a lot of work, and it is. But it's work you do on the front end, and then it's consistency, it's congruency, and it's repetition. That's how brands survive and thrive, especially in today's climate.
Okay, wonderful. It is very true. That's how they thrive and survive. Okay, I have a brand new segment to introduce. Brand new segment. We haven't done this before. We're very excited about it. Well, we've done it, but not this organized. It is called The Best of B2B.
So and sort of done it.
It's where we sort of do it. It's where we introduce basically the best of the best industry examples that we've seen of a particular topic. This one is about executive voice. We now know that 56% of professionals stated that a business's executive's presence on social media positively influenced their purchase decision, which is not a huge surprise, but always great to see the data that backs it. So Lita and Obed, could you each share one example of companies that you think are exhibiting a strong executive voice? Is it the company? Is it the executive? What are they doing? How are they engaging? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Lita. Yeah.
I didn't know who you were throwing to. I think one of the examples I came up with was Zoom, right? And what Eric is doing to as the leader of Zoom, having built this company, which then, I mean, hit an inflection point at the time of the pandemic, which who knows if anybody predicted that. You know, he's communicating his own values. He's communicating a lot of his own personal mission, which ties to the company values, but it doesn't tie to the company business, right? Giving back is not what the Zoom platform is about, but there's a way to connect his personal values with action that supports the value proposition of the company. He talks a lot about values. His headline on LinkedIn talks about his values. And I think that's where we can maybe forgive some missteps, right? If Zoom crashes on us in an important call, we look at the founder and say, okay, but the value proposition isn't perfection. It's being inclusive. It's having other focus. It's being part of a community. So we find some tolerance there. And I think that was why I particularly called him out.
Do you know if he has said anything, and sorry for putting you on the spot, but do you know if he's said anything directly about Zoom fatigue? That's something that, like, ways to combat it, or like tips, or do you know if he's addressed that at all?
Well, I think that kind of goes to something you and I were talking about offline, which is some of what very high profile CEOs talk about in the media or talk about in the news is sometimes handed to them or prompted by their support teams. So I know that they've come out with communication about how to best use Zoom, how to use some of the features. I'm sure there's a sales opportunity there, because if you want the really good features, you're going to pay for them. But ways to keep people engaged in the platform. I think any smart business person does that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what a great example. The one that I was thinking of as you asked a question here is Delta Airlines. I think that they've done a phenomenal job of putting the client or the customer at the center and have put a really deep focus on employee engagement and their employee experience so that it can drive that client value. So recognizing that engaging the employee is key to then developing a great experience for the client. And one of the things that I like about Delta as an example is that it is not with one executive. Is as I engage with as a client or as a partner with them, I see it infused in all of their executives. So I really like the real laser focus on overall client experience, everything from their technology to the to the infrastructure to the customer service.
Absolutely. So executive voice is one thing, brand marketing is another thing. How do you think companies can best blend them or unify them? Whose responsibility is that?
Everyone's. I mean, but I think ultimately, when you look at the CEO of a company, or they hold all accountability. On my team, if somebody on my team doesn't deliver, the buck stops with me, and I take ownership of it, just like I think any senior executive would. But I think there's a level of accountability when you agree to work with an organization that you're aligning with the values of that company. So you should be really clear on what they are. If you don't align and your values are out of sync, it's going to show up, and it's going to show up in the customer experience, in the way you treat your fellow employees. I mean, as marketers, we know that trust goes throughout the entire organization. But ultimately, full accountability lies at the top.
Yeah, I would concur, and then I would really focus on and put that emphasis is that it's everyone, because the experience, when we go back to where we started this conversation, experience and character is experienced throughout the whole organization. So you can have every employee or every associate is a fail point, right, for the organization. So being able, and then as individuals, right, life is too short. Life is too short. So we should make sure that we're aligning with values and brands and purposes of organization that aligns with who we are, right? And then that helps to forge that relationship stronger, and then amplifies the personality and the character of the organization.
Yeah, I do agree. It's everyone's job. I agree. It starts at the top, ends with the top. I think the executive voice, that's obviously the leader of the company. And I think that whatever your brand marketing team is doing should be consistent with whatever they're saying. It should kind of like be an extension of that. So, forgot to mention, we will do a Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions as we go through, as they come up, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can at the end. So executives participating on social media can be powerful. It can also be risky. We're going to talk about something, a buzz term, cancel culture, a little bit later in the episode, which I'm really excited about. It's super spicy, right up my alley. But first, we're going to talk about the social channels that you should use. So when you're considering social media channels in your brand management strategy, which are the channels that you're considering, and how are you coaching executives? I guess that's more of a question for Lita of how you coach, but Obed can also hopefully speak to what social channels his team is using in brand management strategy. Whoever wants to begin can go ahead.
Well, I'll dive in because you kind of teed that one up. And this is going to sound a little self-serving, but of course, all roads lead to LinkedIn, right? When it's business related, and my clients are in all different industries, all different countries, LinkedIn is the place we connect for business, regardless of industry, sector, whatever the focus is. If there's a business play, we connect through LinkedIn, and there's a strategy for that. The second part of what I would look at is, where are your customers, right? Where is your audience? Is your audience on a Facebook, Instagram? Are they on a Twitter, Snapchat, a YouTube, TikTok? Where's your audience? Because social media is a lot of time. And to be positioning yourself strategically and through a really clear brand focus requires a lot of effort. I know that there's been a lot of lift to build my brand on these platforms, and I go where my audiences are. But the other thing I would say is, even if your audience isn't completely on an Instagram or Facebook, those platforms that are more social and maybe even more casual and playful do allow you to show different sides of yourself. And I think there is a need for that with executive voice. We can't just all be about business all the time. So while my audience might not be on Instagram, my core corporate audience, I want them to go there and see the different things that I talk about in different ways on different platforms. But regardless of platform, everything is public. Everything is permanent and public. And if you want to challenge me on privacy settings, I'll go there all day long. But there is nothing private about anything you enter into an electronic device. Boom.
Yeah.
Hard stop.
Except for WhatsApp. But
I can screenshot anything. I can take a screenshot of anything. So
that is true. Totally agree that you shouldn't just, I think what you were trying to say, you shouldn't just like copy and paste across platforms. There's different platforms for different purposes to show different sides of yourself. But yeah, doing the research and finding out where your core audience is definitely key.
So if I were to take both sides of that question, the coaching and then the platforms. So in starting with the coaching, I would say communicating starts with listening empathetically and starts with a place of learning. So we need to stop the tendency of being the first one to go out and say something, but instead spend the time to listen and learn. And then when you find your voice, what is authentically you, then you share your truth. Then you can speak authentically and realistically about that. So making sure that your voice is the voice that's being heard. And an example of that is just last week, we released our new brand campaign around Let's Create. And then each one of our leaders spoke to Let's Create from a different vantage point. And they spoke to it from the point of where it's meeting. And while our overall brand intent is unleashing the creativity of IBMers working with partners and clients to create something special, the way in which we may do that will show up very differently from each one of our IBMers. And it really harnesses the power and the voice of each one of those IBMers. So that's where I would start from a coaching standpoint, is listen with empathy first and then tell your authentic truth. And then by way of platforms, I'll jump one leader and say LinkedIn, absolutely. So we highlighted our stories through LinkedIn in a very significant way. It serves us well as a platform. And then we know it's a place where people come together. And then where many years ago, it might have been our electronic Rolodex. Now I'm aging myself, but today it's a place to meet, to learn, to inform, and engage, right? So whether you're a recruiter, whether you're a candidate, whether you are an influencer, whether you're a business leader, whether you're a client, it is a place where we come together to learn, inform, and engage. Now, there's other platforms as well, right? I mean, we engage quite heavily on Instagram. Especially depending on which population that you're talking about. There's some population who just engage better through the video and through the pictures, right? So we saw some powerful expressions of people taking the Let's Create emblem and brand, and then define what they wanted to create and do that through photographs and Instagram. So it was really powerful for us in seeing that come to life. Video is a huge platform for us, right? So, and then we think it's more to come, I think, in video and just being able, and I think the pandemic has accelerated the progress and even to your client example, as video platforms have met us where we are. So it is it's an expression where we're going to see more and more of brands and experiences and character come together through various video platforms. And I expect to see more in that space in the coming years.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned other platforms, because I was going to say, I'm not going to cut off your video if you mention other platforms. It is definitely welcome to talk about other platforms. We leverage other platforms. Everyone does. It's part of the ecosystem. And I completely agree about video. I think more to come. And I think more to come on making people people and brands feel more comfortable with video that's not 100% polished. Like I would consider what we're doing like relatively polished, but I think that there's a lot of room for brands to get a little bit more scrappy with their video and just be comfortable with it. So that's my 2 cents.
So if it was really polished, you'd turn some of these grays black.
Who says we're not going to retouch it after? We haven't.
Oh, all right. Then I'm with you. Polish up.
Perfect. Okay, so now it's time for our second segment, which is called Point Counterpoint. We introduce a topic. There is not necessarily a right or wrong answer, and we don't necessarily walk away with a pretty bow. Did you like that graphic? Mm-hmm. Is that why you're smiling? Well, I like the graphic. Okay, so we won't necessarily walk away with like a pretty bow on, what's right, what's wrong, but the point is we're just having an open discussion about it. I already gave away the surprise. This one is around cancel culture. I have another quote for you. So Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, said that it takes 20 years to build brand reputation and about 5 minutes to ruin it. And I've heard the same thing say about reputations, about relationships. Like you're in a relationship you're married to someone for 20 years, takes 5 minutes to ruin it, right? So it applies to all of the different human experiences. Cancel culture is an interesting one. I was watching Netflix the other day. There's a special on it, on cancel culture and how comedians can't really do their jobs anymore because they will get canceled if they say the wrong thing when, in the comedy world, you're supposed to be provocative and what you're saying is not supposed to be taken so seriously. So a little bit different from B2B, but it definitely still applies in the B2B world. So I've heard a lot of theories on it. I've heard, is it just fear tactics? Who's actually being affected by this? Should it be more of like a council culture where we're educating each other rather than leaving zero room for human error or brand error? So what do you guys think? Obed, I'll give you the lead.
Sure. I am not as hard on cancel culture. And I do believe that it has introduced a level of accountability to individuals for what they say and what they believe. And I think, by and large, organizations, crowds, customers are relatively forgiving. It is on the habitual or the most egregious that you strike the balance of being canceled. So I think it is really important that that we are held to account, right? And then to just recognize that it is an era in which we're living, but that doesn't give us a reason to not engage. Right. One of the things that I think can be scary in this in particular environment is people are so afraid to say anything or don't engage. And as a result, do not provide support or do not lean in where it's supposed to. So I do think that it's important from an aspect of accountability. And then we should not disengage because of fear of being canceled.
So this is a lot of my world, not by choice. But, reputation repair, reputation management is a lot of the work that I do. And starting with Me Too and maybe even before that, the idea of holding people accountable to very high standards and questioning and judging behavior and language and relationships and all of that. I mean, it has shown a spotlight on bad behavior, which is good because it's corrected that. But it's also, to Obed's point, made people very nervous, very hesitant to lean in, to be authentic, to share their views. I've seen a lot of it during the pandemic, and there's been a lot of focus on, how celebrities let everything out when they were quarantined, and there was a reaction of consumers saying, wait a minute, you're telling me how sad it is to be quarantined in your house that's like a multi-million-dollar home with 5 swimming pools. Like, I'm sorry, I don't feel bad. So there's all sorts of pushback on authenticity and transparency, and it's been a really interesting conversation. I think when most of us think of cancel culture, we think of social media. Cancel culture within a company, a senior executive acts inappropriately, that becomes an HR issue, and it gets handled differently sometimes than if it's out in the public sphere. There's different levers available to use when it's internal to a company until it gets outside. When it gets outside, it becomes so uncontrolled. And I'll tell you, a lot of the clients that call me, they want it off of Google, right? They want it not to be the first thing people find when they Google their name. And that's a really hard engine to manipulate if you're looking to manipulate it. But to Obed's point, I think authenticity still needs to be there. I think we need to make good choices about the conversations we're willing to lean in on. But I also think we're allowed to have boundaries. We're allowed to have guardrails. And I always coach my clients to identify the topics or the conversations that they don't want to participate in, and then make it known, communicate that, and then stay true to that, right? If you don't want to talk about politics on social media, you're allowed as a human being to say, I'm not going to engage in that. I don't want to comment on religion. I don't want to comment on whatever the boundaries are, and then stay consistent with that. Where people tend to get in trouble is the comments are inconsistent or offensive or tone deaf or inappropriate because they don't have a strategy for how they're going to communicate. And so things start flying random, and now you can't pull it back. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle, and you're in triage, endeavors. And that's never healthy for people. The other thing, and I would go back to what I said about context earlier, if people have a lot of context about you online, and this plays out pretty consistently, if there's a lot of information, content you've authored, relationships, communication, actions that people can see evidence of that is consistent with your values, it makes you a little bit insulated to reputation attacks, to cancel culture attacks. You've got so much positive that this one negative doesn't hold the same weight as if the only thing I know about you is the one negative.
Well said. There is to the point of that Lita made around just pausing and thinking. I heard this illustration once, which really resonated with me, is that words are like feathers, right? Is once you release the feathers, you can't get them back. Try grabbing them. So pause. Think about what it is that you're going to say. Think about what conversations that you're going to engage in, because once it's out there, you can't take it back, regardless of the platform, right? So I think being true, being thoughtful, and in picking those conversations, to Lita's point, is so important.
Yeah, it's like before, when you were saying before, Obed, like you don't have to be the first to say something. I think that like you don't have to be the first. You don't have to say anything at all. If you don't want to, if it doesn't fit with your mission and vision, then you don't have to say anything. And maybe it's better if you don't have a strong opinion either way. It's probably better not to say anything anyway.
Well, I would add to that, Alex, that sometimes, and I've seen this happen time and time again, holding back, getting your thoughts together, your community will actually rally to defend you. And that can be so much more powerful than having some scripted, HR, PR blessed statement that, is an official response. Let your community, if you've built that relationship and you've built a tribe that follows you and ascribes to what you believe in, let them sometimes come to your defense. And that can quiet things down really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's talk about all this through the lens of an employee, because a brand reputation and experience isn't just an external concern. It's also very important internally when it comes to hiring and retention. We all know about the Great Reshuffle. We all know that 41% of the workforce is considering leaving their current employer in the next 6 months or so. So how should we look at brand experience through the lens of the employee? And Lita, we'll begin with you.
Well, I'm going to use an example. People who follow me know that there's a community I am deeply passionate about serving, and that is prior military, right? The men and women who have served in our American Armed Forces. I have, for about 12 years now, served this community deeply because I'm passionate about showing gratitude for my freedom as an American. One of the things I ask them to do is to ask about corporate values. I ask them, as they're going into these opportunities, career opportunities, to hold these employers accountable to the things that they put on their website and in their marketing brochures, because this is a community of people who are very aligned with values. I mean, you don't go into the military because you got nothing else to do. You go in typically because there's a lot of values driving you to do that. And so I ask them to pressure those employers when they say their company is about DE&I, or they say their company is about collaboration and team culture, to really look for examples. And I think if more employees do that and job seekers do that, then we are raising the bar and holding employers accountable, which is a good thing. I think the employers want to be held accountable. It does drive a stronger culture. Retention numbers go up. And to the point we were talking about earlier, we're all working towards the same mission, the same vision, and our values and our actions are aligned with what our employer believes. So that's the lens that I wanted to share through, is what I teach transitioning service members.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I'm getting that book for my, I see it there, Success After Service. I'm getting that fiance of my book for my fiance after this, because he's a veteran. And when I found out you do this for veterans, I swear I got like teary-eyed on our call. I was just like, oh my God, stop.
Oh, you know what, Alex, go see my TED Talk on the work I do with veterans. You will learn more about what he has been through. And a lot of people helped me put that together. So that will.
I will.
So.
Okay. Well, what a great place to piggyback off of. I mean, I think, it's really important. And one of the things that we're proud of double down on the veteran population is that just last year we achieved our goal of hiring 2,000 veterans and established for the first time a Veterans Executive Council focused on mentorship, leadership and advancement, camaraderie and recruitment. And then we're seeing it as one of the most diverse and inclusive of our executive council members, and really showing the power of intersectionality. I think from the standpoint, and it just going back to the original question around brand experience and through the lens of employees, it's so important that organization must have brand management in concert with who they stand for, right? It's not enough for us to just declare lofty goals and not live into them, to have beautiful glossy material, but around what we stand for and what commitments that we're going to make, but realize inside of the organization, there's no place for diversity. I often say to our population internally, it's not enough for us to look different if we sound the same. So from that standpoint, do the employees within the organization have real equitable and inclusive voice? And we know when that occurs, right? We know it through data that those individuals learn more, they sell more, they have greater level of engagement, and then it's more retentive. And to your point around, 41% of the population or workforce is looking for opportunity and looking for move. I see that as a great opportunity, for authentic brands. It's for your own workforce. It's the opportunity to resubscribe, to re-engage, to re-recruit. And then for the potential workforce that is out there, is show them, and it's our opportunity to show them the elegance of working with an organization who stand for something, who stand for diversity, equity, inclusion, who stand for putting clients first, who stand for working with world-class customers and partners. So I think it's such an important population to engage, and let, as brought out with that experience around Delta earlier, is focusing on the engagement of the population so that they can then drive the engagement of the work for your client.
Yeah. And part of the reason why people are, shifting is because all of us have taken a look at our lives with all this free time that we have, and have tried to realize like what is truly important to us. And so brand purpose has really taken a center stage. People want to work for companies where they truly believe, like, not that they just say they believe, they truly believe that they're helping the world. They truly believe in what the company is doing. So yeah, you're right. It is a great opportunity for you to attract people who are like super, super excited about what you're doing.
Your point is such an important one. It's literal and figurative. Like we are literally looking at our lives and looking at ourselves more than we ever did. Like the so the video, it's like I'm looking at myself all day long and seeing all the things that's wrong. So we are really doing self-evaluation, reflection, etc. So your
Yeah.
words have many meanings.
I'm like, man, I got to go get Botox soon after all that looking at myself in the mirror. All right. So yeah, we talked a little bit about DE&I. I think a lot of companies have good intentions. They want to be sparking authentic conversations. They want to harbor a culture of diversity, like Obed said, not just in the way we look, but the way that we think, the way we talk to each other. But I'm finding that there is an issue in, not an issue, but I guess just a confusion around who should own it. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's a two-part question. So how does leadership go about sparking authentic DE&I conversations, especially in light of cancel culture and people being afraid to say the wrong thing? And two, who should be owning that? I think I started with Lita last time, so I'll start with you, Obed.
So by way of, let me start with the ownership piece. I do think it is up to leadership to create a culture where open and transparent conversations prevail. So I would put that ownership there. I would also say that there is a fast second ownership of the individual, right? So to the point that I was making earlier is life's too short. Align with an organization whose values are much like yours, and then create and then be open and share and bring your authentic self into the workplace, because that is what's going to help to co-create, to bring out your own creativity, and then coming at it with a growth mindset. But so that's where I would say the accountability lies. And how can leadership actually spark authentic D&I conversations? I'll use two recent examples in our environment. Like post the George Floyd murder, one of the things that our leadership team discussed and was, as a number of organizations were going out and making declarations about what they were going to do and goals, et cetera, we paused. We paused and said, let's take this as an opportunity to listen to our workforce and then to really understand what is the challenges that is facing our own IBMers for the environment that they live in within the firewall, as well as the context of where they're living out in the community. And through a series of 27 different conversations where each of our senior leaders sat and listened to a population of over 2,500 individuals over a 7-day period, we listened to those conversations, then went back and synthesized them, and then created an action plan around 4 pillars, right? They were around transparency and data. They were around using our technology to help to create a more inclusive society at large. It was around driving public policy, and it was around creating economic opportunity. So it was through the voices of our people that the clarity of those actions came to be. And then I think it's so important that we do that. In 2021, we had a similar but very different experience with our Asian community around Asian hate. And one of our leaders said, look, while we have to act different, we have to listen in the same way. So we created safe space conversations, came up with an action plan that looked different, but was unique to the concerns that we heard from our Asian population, right? And then so I do think that was leadership, pausing, listening, actively listening, and then driving the actions based on what it is that they heard, what it is that we heard, versus, taking knee-jerk action to be the first one out of the gate to make a declaration, because that doesn't then feel authentic to the folks outside of the environment nor inside the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it beautifully, coming from a very, very large organization that had to make some pretty nimble adjustments. I think that is a true testament. I think the way I would look at the question is, authenticity is truth, but authenticity, the way I see it, is not the same thing as full transparency. So leadership authenticity doesn't mean that you can ask me any question and I will always answer, because I get to have some things private and I get to keep some, like I talked about, those boundaries. But what I say should be truthful. What I say I believe in should be authentic. So to that point, I think when we think through the lens of DE&I, who owns it? I think everyone in the organization. And I've seen that work well, and I've seen it not work well to have that mentality. I remember, to your point about the summer when the George Floyd issue was bubbling up in every sector, every industry, every company, working with an aspiring executive who really felt compelled to do something, but it wasn't within her framework or her job to bring that conversation up. Nobody in her company was talking about it the way her experience had been as an African-American woman. And she found a path to that because it was her authenticity. It was her truth to say, I think I can be a voice for this. And luckily she had some fabulous senior leaders who respected that. And to your point, brought her in for those conversations. And now she's running, the global diversity for her company. And I've seen that happen in different sectors. Clients who are passionate about sustainability, who find a path in their own company. And then there are companies who say, we're fine acknowledging it, but we're not going to retool our systems and our culture to embrace it. Those companies have a different challenge, perhaps eventually. But the point is, I think everybody owns it. I think if you're a junior person on the team, you own it. You owe it to yourself to be authentic and truthful. And you've got to find the right time and the right place to bring that forward. Executives absolutely should be speaking a voice that is consistent with the company, consistent with their own values, and is within a framework that supports where the company is going. And if that doesn't work for you personally, there are other jobs out there and other opportunities. And that's where I think we are in terms of this authenticity, leadership, executive voice piece. Is we're going to see a lot of change perhaps at the top levels of leadership, because those people whose reputation and legacy is tied to a company that might not support what they believe in, that's not sustainable.
Absolutely. We are just about ready for Q&A. But before we get to Q&A, I just wanted to mention that we have a survey that we just set live. If you wouldn't mind taking it, it's quick 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. And we just want to see how we're doing. If you have any feedback, if you have any ideas for future topics, we just want to make sure that we're addressing the topics that are most timely for your company. So feel free to complete that survey, and we really appreciate you. All right, so Q&A, let's see what we have here. All right, Jade asks, as a small business, how do you build trust and reputation in a new market where people don't know you? Well, I think there's probably a lot of steps, but maybe we can just give her advice into like where to start. What are some good first steps?
I'll jump in. I think it's taking every asset you have available and leveraging it, right? If you're a small business in a new market and you have one positive customer experience, leverage that. Build more customers like that one customer, get testimonials, get referrals, get that pass along value. Because if other people speak about you, that's called third-party credibility, and it is tremendous. Make sure that you're including all those voices on your website. Let people know what you stand for. I work with a small business here in Colorado, and I'm doing some work with them. And one of the things that they're all about is their employees. They love their employees and they invest so much in their employees. But if you go to the company website, they don't show pictures of them. It's like, let us get to know these people that you care so much about. And that starts to spread. And then as it spreads, measure and monitor and leverage, and measure and monitor and leverage to keep building that momentum that you've already got started.
Well said. Only thing I'd add is the power of the network and the influencer. So being sure to look in the market to understand who are the key influencers, and then having them speaking on your behalf is quite helpful.
Yeah, and I'm sure you don't mean Instagram influencers who pay to hold up a product. I'm sure.
Yeah, speaking of, I could go off on a whole tangent talking about the Super Bowl ads and how essentially all like a lot of the brands just hired actors to kind of like tell their brand story for them. But that should be another episode. I'll do another episode on that. But while I have you guys, all right, so let's see. Here's an interesting one. Anastasia says, storytelling is such a powerful tool in building a successful brand. Beyond being a means of spreading a brand's purpose, it also constitutes a point of communication and connection with consumers. Could you please share your experience and strategy on how a brand's storytelling shifts and changes according to culturally different consumer audiences, as for instance, in marketing a product or service in foreign markets?
I'll let you take that one first.
So I'll start by saying storytelling is so important, and we're using the technique in our Let's Create brand relaunch. Is the most significant brand relaunch that we've had in the last decade, and ensuring that we're telling real stories of experiences with who we're working with clients and with partners, and what it is that we do. And then real stories help to tell this, your clients and your partners and potential candidates and employees who you are and what you stand for. So I would wholeheartedly say, lean into real stories of real work that emphasize and describe who you are, and with real individuals. It's also an important part of our employee campaign, because it is around our employee value proposition, because we recognize that it is each individual employee that makes up IBM collectively. And to Lita's point earlier, right, is like, the organization that their experience was through the employee, but didn't put faces of the employees. That is, who we are, is about the IBMer. The greatest invention of IBM is the IBMer. So being able to tell real stories through the people that have created those opportunities, through the clients who have experienced them, to the partners who've seen you in action with them, I think is so important to a brand.
And I would just add a little bit, because storytelling in different cultures is no different for a person than it is for a company. We have to be sensitive to the cultural nuances and filters of that environment. So if I'm working with a client in a foreign culture and I'm talking about LinkedIn, knowing that there may be some sensitivity around, self-promotion and coming off as arrogant, we're going to always temper that. And I think cultural sensitivity is a beautiful thing. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I love the diversity of my life and my network, but I think we also have to remember that we all work in a global environment. Whether or not you have a connection to something outside of your own culture and community, we're all connected. I'm watching the chat and people are saying they're from all over the world. That's where we are today. And that's the beauty of where we are. We should be sensitive to that. But we also get to own our own authentic voice in that lens. And storytelling is not about translating, right? It's not about taking word for word. It's about making sure that the message, the narrative resonates in a different language and culture. And I think that's where we all get to grow.
We have so many more questions. We're not going to be able to get to them all. There are a lot around how to create a culture that is an open space for safe discussions, and how to take the feedback as you're getting it and incorporate it into your messaging. But you know what? I smell a follow-up blog post because we're out of time. So
we'll say the short answer is listening. Yeah. But there's a follow-up blog to come.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap things up. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in and being so engaging throughout the broadcast, for all of your thoughtful questions and comments. We hope that you learned something today to bring back to your team. And join us for our next Live with Marketers happening on March 24th, where we'll discuss how B2B marketers can best navigate the changing privacy landscape and how it's going to make us better marketers. Super interesting, timely topic. And keep an eye on your email for the follow-up, the recording of this that we'll send out along with some key takeaways from the discussion. And last but not least, Thank you to our amazing guests, Lita and Obed. This has been such an honor and just probably the best part of my month. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having us.
much.
Okay, with that, take care, everyone. Keep yourself safe, mind yourself, and we'll talk soon.